I understand it.
Yeah.
Like you have sources. There's always a documentary. I can remember going back years ago, my wife and I watching a documentary, and maybe she's more of a bleeding heart than me, and she's like, "That guy's innocent." And I said to her, "Hey, who gave the insight or the scoops?" They get the documentary lean. So that's the reality of all documentaries. They lean one way or another based on who gives them information. So did you think this was anti-Belichick or reasonably framed as a coach that sort of was seeking control at the end, didn't have it, could not fix his Brady stuff? Well, how did you view it?
I think there was some stuff that was accurate about the end and the way that it ended. Yeah. Do I think they painted him in too harsh a light? Yes. And is part of that his fault? Yes. My impression watching Bill was he went into the interview room intent on getting information and giving none. Right. Like I think the reason he did the interviews, and this is just my own personal opinion, was so he could figure out what everybody else was going to say about him. And he wasn't going to give oxygen to a documentary that I think he would probably think was a campaign video for Robert Kraft to get in the Hall of Fame. So, like, I just think the premise of it and the fact that it was connected to the book, the Jeff Benedict book, which, initially, had been sort of pitched as a Kraft biography. I think the history of it and the background of it made Bill skeptical. And I think because Bill was skeptical going in, he didn't want to help with the effort. He did want to know what was in there, but he didn't want to help with the effort, which I think allowed for him to be painted in a bad light. And he doesn't come out of this looking great. And I think a lot of it's unfair. But again, the documentarians did give him the chance to defend himself.
Yeah. And the other thing is whoever wins the war writes the book, and Brady leaves and wins a Super Bowl. And Brady leaves and Belichick's dynasty crumbles and is bad. So that's part of it is this, whoever wins, they get the best chapters and they get to write the book. So now the question is, Belichick's gone.
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was saying, but don't you think, I just don't think enough time's passed. I think that's a big part of the problem, don't you? Like, The Last Dance, 20 years have passed, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think maybe the most compelling figure in the whole thing, the guy who was the most honest, the most real, was Drew Bledsoe, right? Well, why is Drew Bledsoe the most honest, the most real, the most compelling character, even though he wasn't a part of this outside of the first 2 years of it, right? The reason why, I think, is because, well, A, he was pivotal in the whole thing, right? But B, because he's had a chance to digest it, because he's had a chance to pull away from it, because he's had a chance to make amends with some of the people that maybe he had a problem with back then. For a lot of people that were involved in this, and really the main protagonists, the three of them, Kraft and Brady and Belichick, they haven't had the time to separate from that yet.
Yeah.
So I do think the lack of a passage of time affects the production of this, And again, I think one of the reasons why The Last Dance was so good is because all those people, all those Bulls people, had a chance to pull away from it. The Patriots people, a lot of them at least, especially from the second iteration of the dynasty, hadn't had that time to take a deep breath and sort of contextualize and internalize all of it.
So, I look at Justin Fields, and there's a story that many teams were interested. So I'm not going to doubt a reporter who has a history of, some accuracy here. But I think to myself, if I'm Justin Fields, I come from a defensive culture and a defensive coach where they like to spend money on defense. I'm not going to do that again. Go to the AFC, which is a tougher. I go to the best division in football, the AFC, which is tougher, and be a backup to Russell Wilson. Like, if he had a lot of options and that was the best option, I'm just saying Russell's the starter here. He's getting quarterback one snaps early, is he not?
He is. And I think Justin's situation was sort of, I think, generated by the way the quarterback market went. I don't know that this is really anybody's fault, but, Chicago viewed at the beginning their two most viable suitors for Justin were going to be Atlanta and Pittsburgh. But they had to wait in the top of the quarterback market to shake out to see the opportunity there. Well, Atlanta signs Kirk Cousins and Pittsburgh signs Russell Wilson. And then, you have teams on the other side of it, the Raiders signing Gardner Minshew, the Vikings signing Sam Darnold, the Patriots signing Jacoby Brissett. Well, those teams, all had needs to hold on to draft picks, the Raiders and Patriots to build their rosters, the Vikings potentially to trade up. So, those teams naturally were going to go after quarterbacks that weren't going to cost them draft picks. So I think the Bears got caught in between, those two markets to some degree, and it left them at the end of this with, okay, like, what do we do? And they wanted to do right by Justin. And I think in this situation, this is my take on it, Colin. I think Justin, after everything he'd been through in Chicago the last 3 years, probably valued stability. And there's no more stable place in football than Pittsburgh. And the offensive thing is an issue, but remember, they're bringing in a new offensive coordinator in Arthur Smith coming over from Atlanta, who was in Tennessee all those years, who once resurrected Ryan Tannehill's career and who has built different offenses for different types of quarterbacks and made it work around guys' skill sets. And so let's say it doesn't work with Russell Wilson. Let's say it doesn't go well for the first 4, 6, 8 weeks of the season, which is certainly possible. And Justin shows in practice, like, I can really do it. And now you got a coordinator who can really build an offense for that type of quarterback. And, a player who's coming into this and the bar is sort of low. So, I think if you look at the circumstances and you look at all the individual pieces that went into it, it does make some sense.
So for years I've said that the Cowboys are a great brand, but they feel like a corner store. They love their draft picks. They draft them and pay them. And it's so weird to me. They don't make any real moves. They lose Tyron Smith, who when he started was good. Tony Pollard was a 2, but he was something. And Michael Gallup, who has moments and knows the system. They're all gone. Now they're going to be reliant on the draft, which is a good wide receiver draft. But the offense, now there's clear lines that Dak needs a run game to win. He just does. Yep. The numbers are stark. Mm-hmm. If he gets 100-plus rush yards in support, he wins. Under, he doesn't. Yep. 150, he almost always wins. So I look at it and I think to myself, they're just not that. I mean, in the NFC, where you have these teams that were good last year but could potentially be great, Green Bay's rising. Minnesota's now stacked for Darnold. San Francisco Rams are getting better. And I look at Dallas and I think, what are they? I mean, they lose 3 offensive guys, Van Der Esch, no money, up against the cap. What are they?
I think sometimes we make this mistake too, right? Like the inactivity in free agency, usually it's teams that draft well that have guys to pay. And that's sort of where Dallas is right now. I think to some degree they're being held hostage by the fact that they know they've got 3 really big contracts coming down the pike. One's, of course, Dak. Another one is CeeDee Lamb, who's going into a contract year. And then, oh, by the way, Micah Parsons could cost you more than the Niners paid Nick Bosa. And, you could wait a year, but is he going to be amenable to that, right? So you could have 3 massive contracts coming down the pike. And I think that always was going to prevent them from being big players in free agency. The one thing I would look at here, they've always done a good job drafting offensive linemen. They've generally done a good job drafting running backs.
Yeah.
So I think you can take care of that. And the other thing is, and I think I brought this up to you last week, they've been creative on the back end of the offseason. Before last year, they went out and got Stephon Gilmore, I believe, right before the draft or during the draft. And I could see them taking a creative swing like that before. So I think the first day of free agency was always going to be sort of a non-starter for them because of the situation with Prescott, because of the situation with Lamb, because of the situation with Parsons. And again, I would trust them to get the lineman right. I would trust them to be able to find a running back, and I wouldn't rule out a creative swing coming.
Monday morning quarterback, Albert Breer. Good seeing you as always, man. Appreciate you stopping by.
All right. Thanks, Colin.
Yeah. So have you watched the Apple TV Dynasty thing yet?
I told you that I would. I have not got around to it. We're moving. There's a lot going on. I'm coaching my kids in the playoffs of basketball. March Madness is here. It's an off-season project for me. Okay. Am I missing out greatly? I feel like I've got all the spoilers.
No, because it's not time sensitive. You could watch it in 4 months. It's fine. Yeah. And I tend to watch streaming stuff only after football.
After football.
I write down a list. I do it every year. I got about 7 to 8. I got through all. I have one more to get through. So
what's the next one?
Oh, it's called. My wife and I were talking about it last night. The God something. It's a strange. It's
There's
fiction.
This movie. Is it The Godfather? It's a good movie.
No. It's something. It's a wine business, and it's a global story. Family, power, money, wine business, patriarch passing. I forget what it's called. But that's the next one I'll watch.
You'll be happy to know the first thing I had, the one thing that I took priority with the move. I made sure that the cable company was there the day of, and the Geek Squad to set up our televisions and all that stuff. That was top priority for me. You got to be able to watch stuff.
Absolutely. You and I agree on something. There we go. There are 3 numbers to remember to get the visibility and control you need to make the right business decisions instantly. 36,000, 25, and 1. I'll tell you why. 36,000 is the number of businesses which have upgraded to NetSuite by Oracle. So they're the #1 cloud financial